My sister humiliated me in front of 40 wedding guests by loudly mocking my engagement ring, calling it cheap cubic zirconia from a gas station. As if that insult wasn't enough, she went even further and demanded something outrageous that left the entire room in stunned silence. Can you imagine someone you love, someone who's supposed to be your sister, looking you dead in the eye, on her wedding day, and trying to publicly destroy you, simply because she couldn't stand your happiness? Because that's exactly what happened to me, Cassandra, and what started with a whisper of injustice in a bridal suite, ended with a reckoning so powerful, it didn't just change my life, it sent shockwaves through an entire town. Standing there in that luxurious bridal suite at the Rosewood Country Club, still clutching the bouquet I'd painstakingly arranged, I felt that old, familiar knot of shame tighten in my stomach. 40 pairs of eyes, all belonging to friends, family, even Great Aunt Ruth who was half deaf, were fixed on me, on my left hand, on the engagement ring I'd worn for 8 months. My sister, Bethy, had just delivered her condescending verdict, her voice dripping with that sickly sweet malice she'd perfected since high school. Cassie, honey, where exactly did you get this ring? Because I've been to Tiffany's, I've been to Cartier, and that looks like something from a mall kiosk. The air went out of the room. The ring, which normally caught the light in ways that made strangers stop me in grocery stores, suddenly felt heavy and wrong, like a cheap imitation. It's not fake, I whispered, but even to my own ears, my voice sounded small, swallowed by the silence. Bethy laughed, not the genuine, joyful laugh I remembered from our childhood, but that sharp, cutting sound she developed in college. Oh, sweetheart, I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm trying to save you from embarrassing yourself. Look at the band, it's already turning your finger green. And that center stone, the proportions are all wrong. A real 2-carat diamond wouldn't sit like that. She turned to address the room, as if giving a lecture to a captive audience. Girls, this is why education matters. This is why you don't let some smooth-talking guy from. She paused, dramatically, her eyes narrowing. Where exactly did you say your mysterious fiancé was from, Cassie? You've been so secretive about him. My chest tightened. Secretive? No, I'd been protective. After years of watching Bethany turn everything into a competition, from grade school spelling bees to college boyfriends, even twisting my graduate school acceptance into a conversation about how she'd chosen marriage over career, I'd learned to guard the things that truly mattered. He's from Johannesburg, I said quietly. Bethany clapped her hands together, a brittle, mocking sound. Johannesburg. How exotic. And what does he do again? You mentioned something about mining. The way she said mining made it sound like digging ditches. Several bridesmaids giggled, and heat crept up my neck. He works in the diamond industry. Works in diamonds, she repeated, nodding sagely, as if he sold them at a roadside stand. Then her eyes lit up with malicious glee. Oh my God, Cassie, please tell me you didn't fall for one of those guys who says they're in imports but really just, he owns mines, I said, louder than I intended. The giggling stopped. Bethy's smile faltered for a split second, then returned, twice as bright. He owns mines. Of course, he does. She looked around the room, inviting everyone to share in the joke. And I suppose he flies around in a private jet, too? Yes, I said simply. And has houses in multiple countries? Yes. And just happened to stumble across little Cassie from Millbrook Heights and fall madly in love? The room was so quiet, I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Bethany was still smiling, but something had shifted in her eyes. She'd gone too far, and she knew it, but she was committed to the performance now. Cassie, she said, her voice gentler, but somehow even more cruel. I love you. We all do. But this fantasy has to stop. I can't have my maid of honor wearing costume jewelry down the aisle. What will people think? What will the photographers capture? This is my wedding day. She reached for my hand, her fingers brushing against my ring. Just take it off for today, please, for me. And in that moment, surrounded by silken pearls and judgment, something clicked inside me. A switch flipped. I was done being small. I was done apologizing for taking up space. And I was definitely done protecting people who had never, not once, protected me. I pulled my hand away. No, Bethany blinked. What? I said no. I looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes that had been so eager to watch my humiliation. This ring stays on my finger. If that's a problem for your perfect wedding, then maybe you need a different maid of honor. The color drained from Bethy's face. In 32 years of sisterhood, I had never, not once, said no to her. But what happened next? The phone calls, the lawyers, the documentation that would make my sister's face go white as her wedding dress. Well, that's when things got really interesting. The silence in that bridal suite stretched, taut and trembling, like a rubber band about to snap. Bethy's mouth opened and closed twice before she found her voice. And when she did, it came out as a hiss that could have stripped paint. Excuse me? Every muscle in my body tensed, but my voice stayed steady, surprisingly firm. You heard me. The ring stays. What happened next was pure Bethany, a performance I'd witnessed 100 times before, but never from this side of it. Her eyes filled with tears that somehow never quite spilled over, ruining her makeup. Her voice cracked with just the right amount of wounded vulnerability. Cassie, how could you do this to me on my wedding day? She turned to the room, arms spread wide like she was addressing a jury. This is what I get for trying to protect my little sister from embarrassment. This is what I get for caring. Great Aunt Ruth shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Cousin Jennifer from Denver started gathering up her purse, clearly planning an escape. The younger bridesmaids, college friends of Bethy's who barely knew me, exchanged glances that screamed family drama louder than words. But then Bethany made the one mistake that changed everything. She pulled out her phone. Fine, she said, her voice rising to that pitch that meant she was about to go nuclear. You want to embarrass yourself? You want to walk down my aisle wearing fake jewelry and lying about some fantasy boyfriend? Let's see what social media thinks about this. My stomach dropped. Bethany, don't. But she was already typing, her perfectly manicured nails flying across the screen. Let me just post this gorgeous close-up of your engagement ring so everyone can see exactly what kind of diamonds your mysterious mining mogul can afford. She held up her phone, camera focused on my left hand, and that's when I saw it, that gleeful malice in her eyes that I'd somehow forgotten existed. This wasn't about protecting me or her wedding photos. This was about power. This was about making sure I knew my place in the family hierarchy, even on what should have been the happiest day of her life. Bethany, please, I said, hating how my voice cracked. Don't post that. Why? She asked, still holding the phone up. If it's real, you should be proud. If your fiancé really is some diamond mine owner, then what's the problem? The room held its collective breath. I could feel 40 pairs of eyes bouncing between us like spectators at a tennis match. This was entertainment now. This was the drama that would get whispered about at family reunions for years. And then, like a gift from whatever deity watches over the perpetually underestimated, my phone rang. Not just any ringtone, but the specific one I'd assigned to one person, the opening notes of Can't Help Myself by the Four Tops, which had been playing in the jewelry store in Cape Town when Damien had gotten down on one knee 6 months ago. Bethy's finger paused over her screen. Aren't you going to answer that? I looked down at my phone. Damien's contact photo filled the screen, him laughing on the deck of his yacht in Monaco, sun-bleached hair falling across his forehead, wearing that old NYU t-shirt that probably cost more than most people's cars because of the story behind it. It's him, I said quietly. Your mysterious mining boyfriend, Bethy's voice dripped sarcasm. How convenient. Did he sense you needed rescuing? I almost laughed. If she only knew. I swiped to answer. Hey baby. Cass, my love, came that familiar voice, warm with a slight accent that 8 years at Oxford had never quite erased. How's the preparation going? Are you surviving your sister's wedding festivities? The room went dead silent. Speakerphone had never been so accidentally perfect. I glanced at Bethany, whose face had gone very still. It's been interesting. Interesting how? Good interesting? Or do I need to send the jet interesting? A few bridesmaids giggled nervously. Bethy's grip on her phone tightened. Maybe somewhere in between, I said carefully. Ah. There was a pause, and I could practically hear him thinking. What if I told you that the papers for the Antwerp acquisition just came through? I'm officially the primary stakeholder in 3 more mines as of this morning. Should we celebrate when you get back? The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. That's wonderful, I managed. I also have news about the foundation, the education initiative you suggested. The board approved it. We're funding scholarship programs in 12 countries, starting with South Africa. Your idea, your project to run. Bethy's face had gone completely white. Damien, I said softly, acutely aware that every word was being dissected by my audience. Can I call you back in a few minutes? Of course, darling. Oh, and Cass, wear the ring. The one from Graf. It's gorgeous on you, and more importantly, it's yours. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise about anything that's yours. The call ended. The silence that followed was deafening. Bethy's phone slipped slightly in her hand. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. Around the room, I watched the social mathematics happening in real time. The recalculation of who I was, what my life looked like, and most importantly, what targeting me might cost them. Graf, whispered Jennifer from Denver, who apparently knew more about jewelry than I'd given her credit for. Oh my God, Cassie. Graf doesn't make fake rings. Great Aunt Ruth, deaf or not, had clearly caught enough of the conversation to matter. Did that young man say he owns mines, plural? But it was Bethy's reaction that told me everything I needed to know about what came next. The tears in her eyes weren't calculated anymore. Her hands were shaking, not with performance, but with the dawning realization that she had just tried to humiliate someone who could buy and sell her entire social circle without blinking. And she'd done it in front of witnesses. She'd done it with her phone out, ready to broadcast it to the world. She'd made the one mistake that would change everything. She'd underestimated me one too many times. Bethany, I said quietly, looking directly into her eyes. You might want to put that phone away now. But we both knew it was already too late. The silence stretched for exactly 15 seconds. I know because I counted, watching Bethy's face cycle through confusion, recognition, and finally, sheer terror. Her phone remained frozen in her hand, fingers still hovering over the post button like it might burn her. I walked calmly to the window, my heels clicking against the marble floor of the bridal suite with measured precision. Outside, guests were already gathering on the perfectly manicured lawn of Rosewood Country Club, champagne glasses catching the afternoon sunlight. Everything looked exactly as Bethany had planned, elegant, expensive, flawless. You know what's interesting about social media? I said, not turning around. Once you post something, it never really goes away. Screenshots, cached versions, shared posts, they live forever in the digital world. Behind me, I heard someone clear their throat nervously. Cousin Jennifer, probably. Cassie, Bethy's voice was smaller now, uncertain. I wasn't actually going to, oh, but you were. I turned back to face the room, and I saw something I'd never seen before in my sister's eyes, fear. Genuine fear. You had your finger on that button. You were going to post a photo of my ring with some clever caption about fake jewelry and fantasy boyfriends, weren't you? The room had divided into two camps, those staring at Bethany with dawning horror, and those staring at me like they'd never seen me before, which in a way, they hadn't. I was just. I thought. Bethany fumbled with her words in a way that was almost painful to watch. Almost. You thought you'd humiliate me publicly because you assumed I couldn't fight back. I pulled up my own phone, keeping my movements slow and deliberate. The thing is, Beth, you've always made that assumption about everything, about college, about my career, about my choices, but especially about my ability to protect myself. Great Aunt Ruth shifted in her chair, her sharp eyes moving between us like she was watching a chess match. Cassandra, dear, she said in her crackling voice. Is that young man on the phone really? Damien Rutherford, I said clearly, letting the name settle in the room. CEO of Rutherford Mining Consortium. Harvard MBA, Oxford undergraduate degree in economics. His family's been in the diamond business for 4 generations. Jennifer's purse hit the floor with a soft thud. Someone, I think it was Bethy's college roommate, Sarah, actually gasped. The Rutherfords? Sarah whispered. As in, Rutherford Foundation? The ones who just donated $50 million to build that children's hospital in Ghana? The same ones, I confirmed, never taking my eyes off Bethy's face. She'd gone from white to green, a color that definitely didn't match her carefully chosen bridal suite palette. I held up my phone, making sure everyone could see the screen. Now, I'm going to do something you were about to do to me, Bethany. I'm going to take a photo. But instead of posting your ring and mocking it, I'm going to document this moment. This room, these witnesses. Because what just happened here isn't going away. Cassie, please. Bethy's voice cracked. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I was nervous about the wedding. And you called my ring fake jewelry from a gas station, I said calmly, taking a photo of the room in front of 40 people. You questioned my fiancé's existence and suggested he was some kind of con artist. You were about to broadcast that to your 3,000 Instagram followers. The camera clicked again. You tried to force me to remove my engagement ring on your wedding day. Not because it was inappropriate for the ceremony, but because you wanted to humiliate me. Another click. And when I said no. When I finally, after 32 years, said no to you, you escalated. You pulled out your phone to punish me for having a backbone. I lowered my phone and looked directly at her. So, here's what's going to happen next. You're going to have your wedding. I'm going to stand next to you as your maid of honor, wearing my ring, smiling for all those photographers you're so worried about, and we're going to pretend for the next 6 hours that this conversation never happened. Bethany nodded eagerly, relief washing over her features. Yes. Yes, exactly. We'll just forget this whole, but tomorrow, I continued, cutting her off, we're going to have a very different conversation. About respect. About boundaries. And about what happens when someone tries to publicly humiliate a member of the Rutherford family. The relief vanished from her face. The Rutherford family has lawyers, Bethany. Very good ones. They also have publicists, investigators, and a social media team that monitors every mention of their name online. Did you know that? Did you know that the moment you typed fake diamond and mining mogul in the same post, it would have triggered alerts in 3 different departments? I walked closer to her, and for the first time in our lives, she backed away from me. But more importantly, I said softly, they protect their own. Damien's grandmother survived apartheid, built a mining empire from nothing, and taught him that family, blood or chosen, comes first. Always. Great Aunt Ruth made a small sound that might have been approval. Jennifer was typing frantically on her phone, probably Googling everything I just said. So, here's my compromise, I continued. You get your perfect wedding day. No drama, no scenes, no posts about fake jewelry. I'll smile. I'll hold your train. I'll give the maid of honor speech I've been working on for months, the one where I talk about how proud I am of the woman you've become. Bethy's eyes filled with real tears now. And in return, you never, and I mean never, question my judgment, my relationships, or my worth again. You certainly never attempt to humiliate me in public, because next time, I won't be as generous with my response. I turned to address the room. Ladies, I think we should finish getting ready now. The ceremony starts in an hour, and we all want to look perfect for the photos. The bridesmaids scattered like startled birds, suddenly very interested in their lipstick and hair. But I caught Jennifer's eye before she turned away, and the look she gave me was pure respect. Sarah was still staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Great Aunt Ruth struggled to her feet, and I moved to help her. She gripped my arm with surprising strength and whispered in my ear, about damn time, girl. That ring's been sparkling since you walked in here. Only a fool would think it was fake. She patted my hand and shuffled toward the door, muttering something about young people today and no respect for beautiful things. As the room emptied, Bethany and I stood alone for the first time since the whole ordeal began. She was staring at her phone like it might explode. Cassie, she said finally. I really am sorry. I didn't know. No, I said gently. You didn't know because you never asked. About the ring, about Damien, about my life. You assumed. You've always assumed that your experience of the world is the only valid one, and that anything outside of it must be fake or lesser or wrong. I walked to the mirror and touched up my lipstick, meeting her eyes in the reflection. But you know what the saddest part is? I would have told you everything if you'd just asked nicely. I would have shown you photos of the mines, of the foundation work, of the life I'm building with someone who sees my worth. Instead, you chose cruelty. Bethany sank into the chair behind her, her wedding dress pulling around her like a beautiful, expensive puddle. What happens now? She whispered. I turned back to her, and for a moment, I saw the sister I'd grown up with. The one who taught me to braid friendship bracelets and shared her Halloween candy and cried when our goldfish died. But then I remembered the look in her eyes when she'd held up that phone, and I felt my resolve settle into place like armor. Now you get married, I said, and we see what kind of sister you choose to be after today. The wedding ceremony went off without a hitch, if you didn't count the way Bethy's hands trembled during her vows, or how she kept glancing at me every few minutes, like she expected me to suddenly announce the truth to the entire congregation. I stood beside her in my dusty rose bridesmaid dress, holding her bouquet during the ring exchange, smiling serenely while mentally crafting text messages I'd never send. But as I watched her kiss her new husband, Trevor, sweet, oblivious Trevor, who worked in accounting and collected vintage baseball cards, I realized something that changed my entire approach to what came next. This wasn't really about the ring. It wasn't even about the public humiliation, though that had been the catalyst. This was about 32 years of being dismissed, diminished, and disrespected by someone who was supposed to love me unconditionally. And if I was going to change that dynamic permanently, I needed to do more than just threaten legal action. I needed to show her, and everyone else, exactly who I'd become when she wasn't paying attention. During the cocktail hour, while guests mingled on the terrace and sampled overpriced canapés, I found a quiet corner near the garden fountain and made 3 phone calls that would reshape the entire evening. The first was to Damien. "How did the ceremony go, love?" His voice was warm, tinged with concern. "You sounded tense earlier." "It was illuminating," I said, watching Bethany pose for photos with Trevor's family across the lawn. "Damien, remember that conversation we had about the Foundation's first public event, the charity gala we were planning for next year?" "Of course. You wanted to wait until we had more programs established." "I changed my mind. What would you say to hosting it next month, here in Millbrook Heights?" There was a pause. I could practically hear him thinking. "That's ambitious, but doable." "What's the occasion?" "Let's call it a coming-out party. For both of us, and for the work we're doing. I think it's time people here knew exactly what the Rutherford Foundation stands for." Ah, his voice carried that note of understanding that made me fall in love with him in the first place. "And would this sudden urgency have anything to do with your sister's behavior today?" He chuckled. "In that case, I'll have my assistant start making calls tomorrow. The Peninsula Hotel downtown has a ballroom that could work. How does 500 guests sound?" "Perfect. Make sure to include the guest list from tonight's wedding. All of them." The second call was to my best friend from college, Miranda Chen, who now ran a boutique PR firm in Manhattan. "Cassie, how's the family drama festival?" Miranda's voice was bright with amusement. She'd heard enough stories about Bethany over the years to know exactly what I was dealing with. "Worse than expected, but I'm about to turn it into an opportunity. Are you free next month for the biggest networking event this town has ever seen?" "Do you even have to ask?" "What are we planning?" I filled her in on the basics, the foundation gala, the guest list, the need for media coverage that would put Millbrook Heights on the map for all the right reasons. "So, you want to throw a party that makes your sister's wedding look like a backyard barbecue?" Miranda's delight was audible. "I'm already drafting press releases in my head. The local papers will eat this up. And I can probably get a society photographer from one of the Manhattan magazines." "That's exactly what I'm thinking. But Miranda, make sure the coverage focuses on the Foundation's work. This isn't about revenge. It's about visibility for the causes we support." "Understood. Though the irony will be delicious." The third call was the most important, and I saved it for last. Rutherford Mining Consortium. "Mr. Rutherford's office." The voice was crisp, professional, with just a hint of a British accent. "Hello, Patricia. It's Cassandra." "Miss Cassandra. How lovely to hear from you. How's the wedding?" Patricia had been Damien's executive assistant for 12 years, and she ran his life with the precision of a Swiss chronometer. More importantly, she'd become something like a surrogate grandmother to me, the way only a 60-year-old woman from Yorkshire could. "Educational," I said. "Patricia, I need a favor." "Several favors, actually." "Of course, dear. What can I do?" "First, I need you to coordinate with Damien about the foundation gala we're planning for next month." Full event management, venue, catering, security, the works. Consider it done. What else? I need a complete dossier on everyone at this wedding. Background checks, financial information, social connections, business dealings. Nothing invasive. Just the kind of information you'd compile for any major donor event. Interesting. And the third favor. I took a deep breath. I need you to quietly reach out to the event planning committee at Millbrook Country Club, the one that handles all the major social events in town. I want to sponsor their next 3 charity fundraisers. There was a pause. All 3 of them? That's nearly $500,000 in sponsorship fees alone. I'm aware. But Patricia, here's the thing. I want them to announce the sponsorship tonight, during the reception dinner, before the toasts. Her voice rose slightly. Miss Cassandra, that's in 3 hours. I know it's a lot to ask, but, nonsense, she interrupted, and I could hear her keyboard already clicking. Mr. Damien has been saying for months that we needed to establish a stronger presence in your hometown. This just accelerates the timeline. Give me 2 hours. As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years when it came to my family, excitement. Not the anxious, people-pleasing excitement of trying to meet their expectations, but the genuine thrill of knowing I was about to surprise them all. I made my way back to the reception, where dinner was being served at elegantly appointed tables overlooking the golf course. I found my assigned seat at the head table, naturally between Great Aunt Ruth and Bethy's college roommate, Sarah. You look pleased with yourself, Ruth observed as I sat down. Do I? Like the cat that ate the canary. What have you been up to? Before I could answer, the wedding coordinator approached the microphone at the front of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin our toasts this evening, I have a special announcement from the Millbrook Country Club Events Committee. I felt Bethy's eyes snap to me from across the table. She developed an uncanny ability to sense when something was about to go sideways for her. The coordinator continued, We're thrilled to announce the Rutherford Foundation has generously agreed to sponsor our next 3 major charity events, the annual Children's Hospital Gala, the Veterans Memorial Fund Dinner, and the Educational Excellence Awards Ceremony. This unprecedented sponsorship will allow us to raise more funds than ever before for these vital community causes. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Several heads turned toward me, expressions ranging from confusion to dawning recognition. The Foundation's representative, Miss Cassandra Hartwell, is here with us tonight as maid of honor in the beautiful wedding of Bethany and Trevor Morrison. Let's give her a round of applause for her commitment to our community. The applause was polite but uncertain. Most of the guests were still processing the information. But I caught the moment when understanding hit various tables around the room, the widening eyes, the whispered conversations, the sudden interested looks in my direction. Bethy's face had gone completely pale. Sarah leaned over to me, her voice barely above a whisper. Did you just upstage your sister's wedding reception with a $500,000 charity announcement? I took a sip of champagne and smiled. I prefer to think of it as providing context. Great Aunt Ruth cackled with delight. Oh, this is better than my stories. Much better. Across the table, I met Bethy's eyes. She looked like she wanted to say something, but Trevor was beaming at her, squeezing her hand, and whispering about how amazing it was that her sister was so philanthropic. I raised my champagne glass slightly in her direction, not quite a toast, more like an acknowledgement, and mouthed the words, surprise. Because if she thought the ring revelation was shocking, she had no idea what was coming next. The transformation in the reception hall was immediate and electric. What had been polite wedding chatter moments before became animated conversations about charity work, community involvement, and most importantly, about me. Tables that had barely acknowledged my existence during cocktail hour were suddenly craning their necks to get a better look at the woman who could casually drop $500,000 on local charities without breaking a sweat. But it was at the head table where the real drama unfolded. Trevor, bless his accountant's heart, was practically glowing with pride. Bethany, you never told me your sister was involved with such major philanthropic work. This is incredible. The Children's Hospital has been trying to raise funds for that new wing for 3 years. Bethy's smile looked like it had been painted on with cement. Yes, Cassie's always been full of surprises. Sarah, who had been scrolling through her phone under the table, suddenly straightened like she'd been electrocuted. Oh my God, she whispered, loud enough for half the table to hear. I just Googled the Rutherford Foundation, Cassie. They've donated over $200 million worldwide in the last 5 years alone. Great Aunt Ruth cackled. 200 million? And here I thought you were just good at picking out engagement rings. The ripple effect was beautiful to watch. I could see the information spreading from table to table like wildfire. Phones appeared from purses and jacket pockets. Google searches multiplied across the reception hall. Within 10 minutes, my life had become the most interesting topic at Bethy's wedding. Mrs. Hamilton from the country club board approached our table, her society smile bright enough to power a small city. Cassandra, dear, I had no idea you were connected to such important work. We simply must have lunch next week to discuss how the club can better support these initiatives. Before I could respond, Dr. Patterson from the hospital committee materialized at my other shoulder. Miss Hartwell, I can't tell you how grateful we are for the Foundation's support. Perhaps we could arrange a tour of the new pediatric facilities? I'd love to show you where the donation will make the most impact. Then came the mayor's wife, followed by the chairman of the Veterans Memorial Fund, followed by what felt like half of Millbrook Heights' social elite. Each introduction brought more attention, more questions, more people eager to associate themselves with the mysterious sister who had been hiding in plain sight for years. Cassie. Jennifer from Denver practically jogged over from her table, her husband trailing behind, looking slightly bewildered. I can't believe you never mentioned any of this. Tom and I run a small non-profit back home for underprivileged kids. Do you think, would the foundation ever consider? Send me the information, I said warmly, pulling out my phone to exchange contact details. The foundation is always looking for grassroots organizations making real impact. As Jennifer walked away, clutching my business card like it was made of gold, I caught Bethany staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger or embarrassment. It was something closer to awe, tinged with what looked disturbingly like fear. When did you become this person? She asked quietly during a brief lull in the parade of new admirers. I've always been this person, I replied, adjusting the graph diamond on my finger so it caught the light from the chandeliers. You just never bothered to ask. The real triumph came during the dancing portion of the evening. The band, a surprisingly good group from downtown who specialized in wedding receptions, had just finished a set when the lead singer stepped up to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just received word that we have someone very special with us tonight. Miss Cassandra Hartwell, whose foundation has just made headlines with their generous support of local charities, has requested a song for the happy couple. I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. Bethy's bouquet froze halfway to her chest. The singer continued, she's asked us to play Can't Help Myself by the Four Tops. Apparently, it has special meaning for her own engagement story. As the opening notes filled the air, I saw recognition dawn on several faces around the room. This was the same song that had been playing when Damien called during the bridal suite disaster. But now, instead of being an embarrassing interruption, it became a romantic soundtrack to a love story that suddenly had everyone's attention. Damien's voice echoed in my memory, "Wear the ring, it's gorgeous on you, and more importantly, it's yours." Trevor led Bethany onto the dance floor for what should have been their moment, but I could feel the energy of the room shifting. Conversations at nearby tables were no longer about the bride and groom. They were about the maid of honor, who had just rewritten the entire social hierarchy of Millbrook Heights in the span of 20 minutes. May I have this dance? I turned to find Marcus Webb, the son of the family that owned the largest construction company in 3 counties. We'd gone to high school together, but he'd barely acknowledged my existence back then. Now he was standing there with his hand extended, wearing his most charming smile. I'd be honored, I said, allowing him to lead me onto the dance floor. As we swayed to the music, more couples joined us. But I noticed something remarkable happening. People were positioning themselves to dance near me. Conversations that had been taking place at distant tables migrated to the dance floor. The social center of gravity had shifted, and for the first time in my life, it was orbiting around me instead of my sister. I have to admit, Marcus said, spinning me gently. I always wondered what happened to you after college. Never imagined you'd end up changing the world. I'm not changing the world, I replied. I'm just trying to make it a little better for the people who need it most. And the fiancé, the mining mogul, is he as impressive as he sounds? I smiled, thinking of Damien, probably sitting in his Johannesburg office reviewing foundation proposals while classical music played in the background. More impressive than he sounds. He's the kind of man who measures success by how many lives he can improve, not how many zeros are in his bank account. Sounds like he found the right woman then. As the song wound down, I glanced over at Bethany and Trevor. They were still dancing, still smiling for the cameras, but I could see the strain around her eyes. This was supposed to be her night, her moment to shine. And instead, she was watching her little sister command the room with an ease she'd never possessed. But the real victory wasn't in the attention, or the admiration, or even the way people were suddenly interested in everything I had to say. The real victory was in the way I felt, calm, confident, completely comfortable in my own skin for the first time in years. As I made my way back to the head table, Patricia's voice buzzed through my phone with a text message. Foundation Gala confirmed for 4 weeks from tonight. Peninsula Hotel Ballroom reserved. Guest list from tonight's wedding has been compiled. Initial media outreach scheduled for Monday morning. Mr. Damien sends his love and says to enjoy your moment. I smiled, slipping the phone back into my clutch. This wasn't just my moment. This was the beginning of something much bigger. And as I watched Bethany cut her wedding cake with hands that still trembled slightly, I realized that sometimes the sweetest victory isn't winning the game everyone else is playing. Sometimes it's revealing that you've been playing an entirely different game all along. One where everyone wins, except the people who tried to tear you down. The confrontation came at 11:30 p.m. in the bridal suite where everything had started 6 hours earlier. I was alone, carefully removing the bobby pins from my hair and thinking about the car service that would take me home when the door burst open so hard it hit the wall behind it. Bethany stood in the doorway, still wearing her wedding dress, but her perfect updo was coming undone, and her makeup had started to streak. Behind her, I could hear the distant sounds of the reception winding down, laughter, clinking glasses, the band playing their final set. What the hell was that? She demanded, slamming the door behind her. I continued removing pins, meeting her eyes in the vanity mirror. You'll have to be more specific. It's been a long day. Don't. Her voice was sharp, brittle. Don't you dare pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. The charity announcement, the foundation, the way you turned my wedding reception into your personal networking event. I turned around slowly, studying her face. The fear from earlier had crystallized into something harder, rage mixed with desperation. I thought you'd be happy, I said calmly. Your wedding just raised awareness for 3 major local charities. The Children's Hospital alone will benefit from thousands of dollars in additional donations because of tonight's publicity. This isn't about charity, and you know it. She took a step closer, her dress rustling against the marble floor. This is about you humiliating me, just like you tried to humiliate me with that ring. The accusation was so backwards, so completely divorced from reality, that I actually laughed. I tried to humiliate you, Bethany? Are you listening to yourself? Everyone was talking about you at my wedding. During my reception. People were more interested in your foundation than my marriage. And that bothers you? Of course, it bothers me. The words exploded out of her. This was supposed to be my day, my moment, and you just swooped in with your mysterious billionaire boyfriend and your secret charity work and made me look like a fool. I stood up, smoothing down my bridesmaid dress. You made yourself look like a fool when you called my ring fake jewelry from a gas station in front of 40 people while trying to force me to remove it from my hand. I didn't know. Exactly. I stepped closer to her, and for the first time in our lives, she backed away from me instead of the other way around. You didn't know because you never asked. You saw something that didn't fit your narrow understanding of my life. And instead of being curious or supportive or even just polite, you decided to attack it. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I was trying to protect you. From what? From wearing beautiful jewelry? From being engaged to a man who loves me? From having resources to help people? I shook my head. No, Bethany. You weren't trying to protect me. You were trying to put me back in my place. That place where I'm the lesser sister. The one who doesn't deserve nice things. The one who should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention you throw my way. My voice remained steady, but I could feel 32 years of resentment threading through every word. The place where I smile and nod and pretend it doesn't hurt when you dismiss my choices, mock my dreams, and treat me like an inconvenience at family gatherings. She stared at me, her face cycling through emotions too quickly to track. But here's what you never understood, I continued. I left that place years ago. I built a life you couldn't even imagine, with a man who sees my worth, doing work that actually matters. I just never bothered to rub your face in it, because I thought family was supposed to support each other. We do support each other. When? When have you ever supported me without making it about yourself? When I got into graduate school, you spent the entire family dinner talking about how hard it must be to choose education over finding a husband. When I got my first job, you questioned whether I was really qualified or if it was just diversity hiring. When I told you I was engaged, your first response was to ask if I was sure he wasn't using me for a green card. Each example hit her like a physical blow. Her face went progressively paler. And today, I said, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. When you saw my engagement ring, a ring that represents the love and commitment of the most incredible man I've ever known, your immediate instinct was to call it fake and humiliate me in front of everyone we know. Tears started flowing down her cheeks, cutting tracks through her foundation. I didn't mean, yes, you did. I reached for my purse, checking that I had everything. You absolutely meant it. Just like you meant every other little cut, every dismissive comment. Every time you made me feel small so you could feel big. Cassie, please. You're my sister. I love you. I stopped at the door, my hand on the handle. Do you? Because love doesn't try to tear people down. Love doesn't call someone's most precious possessions fake. Love doesn't demand someone remove their engagement ring because it threatens your sense of superiority. She was crying openly now, makeup ruining her perfect bridal look. What do you want me to do? How do I fix this? For a moment, I felt the old, familiar urge to comfort her, to minimize my own hurt so she could feel better. But then I remembered the look in her eyes when she'd held up that phone, ready to broadcast my humiliation to the world. I want you to think about who you want to be, I said quietly. Because the sister who tried to destroy me in that room this afternoon, she's not someone I can have in my life anymore. You can't mean that. I mean every word. The foundation gala is in 4 weeks. You and Trevor are invited. Of course, your family. But, Bethany, I met her eyes one final time. If you come as my guest. Not as someone who gets to judge my choices or question my worth. And if you can't do that, if you can't celebrate my happiness without making it about your insecurities, then maybe it's better if you don't come at all. I stepped into the hallway, the sounds of the reception cleanup echoing around me. Behind me, I heard her sob, a broken, desperate sound that would have sent me running back to comfort her just that morning. Instead, I walked toward the elevator, my heels clicking against the marble with the same measured precision I'd used when I took control of that bridal suite 6 hours ago. As the elevator doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished metal. My hair was half down. My lipstick had worn off, and there were exhaustion lines around my eyes. But I was smiling. For the first time in my life, I had told my sister exactly who I was and what I deserved. I had set boundaries that actually meant something. I had chosen my own worth over her comfort, and it felt absolutely liberating. My phone buzzed with a text from Damien. How did the rest of the wedding go? Are you ready to come home? I typed back. More ready than you know. And yes, let's start planning that gala. It's time for Millbrook Heights to meet the real Cassandra Hartwell. The elevator opened onto the main floor where a few lingering guests were collecting their coats and saying their goodbyes. Several people smiled and waved at me. A few even approached to exchange final pleasantries about the foundation work. But as I walked toward the exit, I realized that their opinions, positive or negative, didn't define me anymore. Neither did Bethy's jealousy or approval. I was finally, completely, authentically myself, and that was worth more than all the diamonds in South Africa. The phone call started the next morning at 7:15 a.m. I was still in bed, savoring my first cup of coffee and the unusual sensation of sleeping until I naturally woke up instead of being jolted awake by anxiety about family obligations when my mother's ringtone shattered the peaceful silence. Cassandra Marie Hartwell. What in God's name happened at that wedding last night? I took another sip of coffee, noting how my mother's voice carried that particular pitch it reached when she was trying to control a situation that had already spiraled beyond her influence. "Good morning, Mom. The wedding was lovely. Bethany looked beautiful. Don't you dare deflect with me. Margaret Patterson called me at 6:30 this morning, 6:30, Cassandra, to tell me that you're apparently engaged to some African mining magnate and running a multi-million-dollar charity foundation. She wanted to know why I'd never mentioned having such an accomplished daughter." The word accomplished dripped with the same tone she might use for diseased or contagious. "Because you never asked," I said simply. "I never." She sputtered for a moment. "Of course, I ask about your life. We talk every week. We talk every week about Bethy's life, Mom. About her job, her wedding planning, her house renovations, her friend drama. When you ask about me, it's usually to find out if I'm available to help with something for Bethany." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. "That's not true," she said finally, but her voice had lost some of its initial fire. "Mom, when's the last time you asked me about my work? Not whether I was happy at my job, but what I actually do all day. When's the last time you asked about my relationship with Damien beyond whether we'd set a wedding date? When's the last time you asked me about my dreams or my goals or what I'm proud of?" Another silence. "We talk about those things." "No, we don't. And yesterday, when I tried to defend myself against Bethy's accusations, you weren't even there. You've never been there when she decides to tear me down, because it's easier to let her have her moment than to deal with the fallout of calling her out." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "Bethany told me what happened. She was just trying to prevent you from being embarrassed." And there it was. The pattern that had shaped my entire childhood, laid bare in one sentence. "Mom, do you want to know what actually happened yesterday?" "No, you know Bethy's version. Do you want to hear mine?" For the first time in our conversation, she hesitated. "Of course." I told her everything. The 3 days of cooking preparation that Bethany had insisted on. The handmade place cards and carefully chosen menu. The moment when Bethany called my ring fake jewelry in front of 40 people and tried to force me to remove it. The threat to post about it on social media. The way she dismissed Damien as a fantasy boyfriend and suggested I was delusional. With each detail, the silence on the other end grew heavier. She was trying to humiliate me, Mom. Publicly. At her own wedding. And when I finally stood up for myself, when I finally said no to being treated like that, she melted down because she couldn't handle not being the center of attention. "That doesn't sound like Bethany," my mother said weakly. "It sounds exactly like Bethany. It sounds like the Bethany who convinced you I was too sensitive when she cut up my science fair project in 8th grade. It sounds like the Bethany who told everyone at my college graduation party that I'd probably never use my degree anyway. It sounds like the Bethany who spent my entire engagement dinner last Christmas questioning whether Damien was real because she couldn't believe someone would actually want to marry me." My mother's breathing was audible now, quick and shallow. "You knew about all of this. You were there for most of it. But it was always easier to smooth things over, to tell me to be the bigger person, to make me apologize for upsetting her, than it was to address her behavior. She's been through a lot. So have I, Mom. So have I. But my struggles never seemed to matter as much as hers." The second phone call came an hour later from my father. His approach was different, more direct, more aggressive. "Cassandra, this foundation nonsense has got to stop. You're embarrassing the family with these grand gestures. People are asking questions we can't answer." "What kind of questions?" "About why we never knew about your situation. About why we seem to know nothing about our own daughter's life. Margaret Hamilton made it sound like we're negligent parents. And there it was, the real issue. Not that I'd been hurt. Not that Bethany had behaved badly. But that their social standing was being questioned. Dad, maybe you should ask yourself why you don't know about my life, instead of being angry that other people noticed. Don't be smart with me, young lady. This whole thing has gone too far. Bethany called us this morning in tears. She's devastated about what happened. What about what happened to me? What about it? So Bethany made a comment about your ring. Family members say things to each other. That's not grounds for this. This public spectacle you created. I felt something cold settle in my chest. A comment about my ring, Dad? She called it fake jewelry from a gas station. She tried to force me to remove my engagement ring. She threatened to post about it online to humiliate me. And when I refused to be degraded, she had a meltdown because people started paying attention to someone other than her. You're exaggerating. I have witnesses, 40 of them. People are loyal to Bethany. She's been a fixture in this community for years. And I haven't been? The pause told me everything I needed to know. That's different. You moved away. You kept to yourself. Bethany stayed close to home. She contributed to local organizations. She joined the Junior League and planned charity luncheons. I started an actual foundation that's donated millions of dollars to education and healthcare in developing countries. But her contribution counts more because it was visible to you. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. The third call came from Great Aunt Ruth, and it was the one that broke my heart. Honey, her crackling voice was gentle, tired. I've been thinking about yesterday, about what I saw in that room, and I owe you an apology. A big one. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. Aunt Ruth, you don't. Yes, I do. I've watched that girl tear you down for years. Years, Cassandra. And I told myself it was just sister rivalry. Just normal family dynamics. But yesterday, seeing your face when she went after that beautiful ring of yours, seeing the way you handled yourself with such grace, I realized I've been complicit in something I should have stopped a long time ago. I watched you shrink yourself to make her feel bigger, she continued, as tears started flowing before I could stop them. I watched you apologize for things that weren't your fault. I watched your parents smooth over her cruelty by telling you to be more understanding. And I said nothing because it was easier to keep the peace than to call out the truth. It's not your fault. It is my fault. I'm 86 years old, honey. I don't have to worry about keeping family harmony anymore. I should have spoken up. I should have told them that the way they let her treat you was wrong. I was crying openly now, the kind of tears that come from finally being seen. But I'm speaking up now, Ruth said firmly. And I want you to know that what you did yesterday, standing up for yourself, refusing to be diminished, that made me proud, prouder than I've been in years. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, processing the morning's conversations. 3 calls that had revealed the same pattern from 3 different angles. Bethy's behavior had never been addressed because everyone around her had found it easier to manage my reaction to it than to confront her actions. For 32 years, I'd been the family shock absorber, cushioning everyone else from the impact of her selfishness and cruelty. But now, for the first time, people were being forced to see the pattern clearly. And some of them, like Ruth, were horrified by what they had enabled. Others, like my parents, were more concerned with protecting their image than addressing the truth. And that told me everything I needed to know about what came next. 2 weeks after the wedding, the Rutherford Foundation Gala had taken on a life of its own. What had started as a strategic response to Bethy's humiliation had evolved into the social event of the decade for Millbrook Heights. Patricia called it, quote, the coming out party for a hidden dynasty. And based on the RSVPs flooding in, she wasn't exaggerating. Miss Cassandra, Patricia's voice crackled through the phone as I reviewed seating charts in my apartment. We have a situation that's rather unprecedented. Good. Unprecedented? Or crisis management? Unprecedented. Fascinatingly unprecedented. The guest list has grown to 750 people. The mayor's office called to request additional security. 3 state senators have confirmed attendance. And, she paused dramatically. Vanity Fair wants to send a photographer. I set down my coffee cup carefully. Vanity Fair? Apparently, your story has reached some rather influential circles. Miranda's PR work has been, shall we say, extraordinarily effective. The narrative of the overlooked sister who built a philanthropic empire while being dismissed by her family has struck a nerve with several high-profile publications. Through my apartment window, I could see the town where I'd grown up spread out below me. The same streets where I'd walked to school feeling invisible. Where I'd attended family gatherings feeling like an afterthought. Where I'd learned to make myself smaller to avoid conflict. Now those same streets would soon be filled with limousines and security details, all coming to celebrate work I'd been doing quietly for years. There's more, Patricia continued. The Peninsula called this morning. They've had to convert 2 additional conference rooms into overflow seating areas. Local restaurants are booked solid for the weekend. The economic impact on your little town is going to be substantial. And the family? Ah, yes. That's where things get particularly interesting. I braced myself. Your parents called the foundation offices yesterday. 3 times. They wanted to discuss coordinating family involvement in the event planning process. Patricia's tone made it clear what she thought of that idea. And you told them that all event coordination was being handled by professional staff, but that we looked forward to seeing them as guests at the gala? How did they take that? Not well. Your mother suggested that it was inappropriate for them to be treated like ordinary guests at an event their daughter was hosting. Your father mentioned something about the family's reputation in the community. I closed my eyes. Even now, even after everything, they were trying to insert themselves into the narrative as important players, rather than simply being proud of what I'd accomplished. There's one more thing, Patricia said gently. We've had inquiries from several media outlets about interviews. They want the full story, your background, your relationship with Mr. Damien, your philanthropic work, and yes, what happened at your sister's wedding that prompted this event. My stomach clenched. What kind of inquiries? Nothing malicious. Actually, quite the opposite. The angle seems to be about hidden philanthropists, about people doing extraordinary work away from the spotlight. But they are curious about the family dynamics, especially after some of the wedding guests have been, shall we say, very chatty on social media. I pulled up Instagram on my phone and searched for posts from the wedding. What I found made me laugh and cringe simultaneously. Jennifer from Denver had posted a photo of me during the charity announcement with the caption, "When you find out the quiet bridesmaid is secretly changing the world #plotwist #philanthropy queen." It had been shared hundreds of times. Sarah had posted a series of stories about meeting a real-life hidden heiress, complete with photos of my ring that showcased every facet of the Graf diamond in stunning detail. The comments were a mix of awe and speculation about how much it was worth. But it was the post from Marcus Webb that really caught my attention. He'd shared a photo of us dancing with a long caption about, quote, reconnecting with an old classmate who turned out to be one of the most impressive people I've ever met, and tagged several major news outlets, apparently trying to generate coverage for the foundation's work. The publicity is getting out of hand, I said to Patricia. Or it's exactly what we need, she replied. Miss Cassandra, do you realize what you've accomplished here? In 2 weeks, you've put your hometown on the map, generated national interest in the foundation's work, and created a template for how philanthropy can engage local communities. This isn't just about your family anymore. This is about something much larger. She was right. But that didn't make it less terrifying. The real test came that afternoon when I decided to run errands in town. I needed to pick up my dress from the alterations shop, a stunning midnight blue gown that Damien had flown in from a designer in Milan, and grabbed some last-minute items for the apartment where Damien would be staying during his visit. The moment I walked into the dry cleaners, I knew things had changed irrevocably. Miss Hartwell. Mrs. Chen behind the counter practically shouted my name. Your dress is ready, and I have to tell you, it's the most beautiful gown we've ever had in this shop. My daughter Googled the designer. Do you know this dress costs more than most people's cars? Before I could respond, she continued, and I saw the pictures from your sister's wedding. That ring, my goodness, I've been in the jewelry business for 30 years and I've never seen anything like it. The way it catches the light. You must feel like a princess. As I waited for her to retrieve the dress, I noticed several other customers lingering nearby, clearly hoping to overhear our conversation. One woman was not so subtly taking photos with her phone. Mrs. Chen, I said quietly. Could we perhaps keep the dress details between us? Of course, she nodded enthusiastically, then immediately turned to the woman behind me and stage whispered, this is the young lady I was telling you about, the one with the foundation. My next stop was the grocery store, where the attention was even more intense. I made it exactly 3 aisles before being approached by someone I vaguely recognized from high school. Cassie, oh my God, I can't believe I'm running into you. The woman, I thought her name might be Jessica, was practically vibrating with excitement. I heard about the gala, and I have to ask, is it true that celebrities are coming? My cousin works at the peninsula and she said they've had calls about helicopter landing permissions. I really couldn't say. And your fiancé? When do we get to meet the mysterious mining mogul? Is he as gorgeous as he sounds? By the time I escaped the grocery store, I had been asked for selfies 6 times, received 3 business cards from people wanting foundation connections, and overheard at least 4 separate phone conversations about the upcoming gala. But the most telling moment came as I was loading groceries into my car. I spotted Bethy's silver Mercedes pulling into the parking lot. For a moment, I thought she might drive right past me, pretend she hadn't seen me. Instead, she parked 3 spaces away and got out, her movements careful and deliberate. "Cassie," she said, approaching slowly like she was trying not to spook a wild animal. "Bethany." We stood there in the grocery store parking lot, 2 sisters who had said things to each other that couldn't be unsaid, while shoppers walked past us, whispering and pointing. "Everyone's talking about your gala," she said finally. "So I've noticed." Trevor got a call from his boss. Apparently, 3 of their biggest clients are attending. His firm wants him to make sure we're there to network. Her voice was small, almost defeated. "You should come if you want to. It's a celebration of the foundation's work, not a family obligation." But she struggled with the words. "I don't know how to be at an event like this. I don't know how to be your sister at an event like this." For the first time since the wedding, I felt a flicker of sympathy for her. She was facing the same thing I dealt with my entire life, walking into a space where she didn't know the rules, where she couldn't control the narrative, where she might not be the most important person in the room. The difference was, I'd learned to navigate that discomfort with grace. She was about to learn whether she could do the same. "Then maybe," I said gently, "it's time to figure out who you want to be when you're not the center of attention." I got in my car and drove away, leaving her standing in the parking lot with the weight of that question hanging between us. 2 weeks later, she would have her answer. We all would. The ultimatum arrived on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week before the gala. I was in my apartment reviewing the final guest list with Patricia via video call when my doorbell rang with the urgent, insistent pattern that meant trouble. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing on my doorstep, both dressed in what I'd learned to recognize as their serious conversation attire. My father in his navy suit, reserved for board meetings and funerals. My mother in the black dress she wore when she needed to project authority. "Cassandra." My father's voice carried through the door. "We need to talk. Now." I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. "Good morning. What can I do for you?" My mother pushed past me into the living room like she owned the place. "We've been patient with this nonsense long enough. It's time for some hard truths." Patricia's voice crackled through my laptop speakers from the coffee table. "Miss Cassandra, should I call you back?" "No, stay on the line," I said, following my parents into the room. This might be important for event planning. My father's face darkened at the implication that their visit was just another logistical detail to manage. "Cassandra Marie," my mother began, settling herself on my sofa like she was preparing to deliver a verdict. "Your behavior over the past month has been completely unacceptable. This whole foundation spectacle, the media attention, the way you've embarrassed your sister, it ends now." "I'm sorry, what exactly ends now?" "This ridiculous gala," my father said, his voice carrying the tone he'd used when I was 16 and had missed curfew. "You're going to call it off." I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. "Excuse me?" "You heard him." My mother continued. "Cancel the event. Return the money. Issue some statement about family obligations or scheduling conflicts. End this circus before it destroys our family's reputation completely." From the laptop, I heard Patricia's sharp intake of breath. She was still on the call, bearing witness to this moment. "And why?" I said carefully. "Would I do that?" "Because," my father leaned forward, his hands clasped in front of him in what I recognized as his negotiation pose. "If you don't, you're no longer our daughter." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. "I'm no longer your daughter?" "That's right," my mother said, her voice steady as a surgeon's scalpel. "We've spoken to our attorney. You can keep whatever money your boyfriend has given you, but you'll never see another penny of family inheritance. More importantly, you'll never be welcome at another family gathering. No Christmas, no Easter, no birthdays, no anniversaries. Nothing. Your choice, my father added. Call off this ridiculous publicity stunt and come back to the family, or lose us forever. I stood there in my living room looking at the two people who had raised me, who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and attended my graduation ceremonies. The same people who were now threatening to disown me unless I allowed my sister to continue treating me like a lesser being. Patricia, I said, addressing my laptop. Are you getting all of this? Every word, Miss Cassandra. My father's face flushed red. This is not a business negotiation, young lady. This is your family. Is it? I sat down on the chair across from them, maintaining eye contact with both. Because family doesn't usually deliver ultimatums. Family doesn't threaten to cut you off for refusing to be humiliated. Family doesn't demand that you cancel an event that will raise millions of dollars for children's hospitals and education programs because it makes them uncomfortable. This isn't about charity, my mother snapped. This is about you embarrassing your sister at her own wedding and then doubling down with this performance. Performance, I repeated. Is that what you think the foundation is? A performance? We think, my father said, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet he used when he was truly angry. That you've let this relationship with your foreign boyfriend go to your head. We think you've forgotten who you are and where you come from. We think you need to remember that family comes first. Family comes first? I echoed. Where was that principle when Bethany called my engagement ring fake jewelry? Where was family loyalty when she tried to humiliate me in front of 40 people? Where was family first when she threatened to post about it online? That was different. No, I said, standing up. It wasn't different. It was exactly the same pattern that's existed my entire life. Bethany acts out. I absorb the damage. Everyone expects me to be the bigger person and move on. Well, I'm done being the shock absorber for this family's dysfunction. My mother's hands were shaking now. Whether from anger or desperation, I couldn't tell. Cassandra, please think about what you're throwing away. Think about your children. What will they think when they learn their mother chose strangers over her own family? The manipulation was so blatant, so calculated, that I almost laughed. What will they think when they learn their grandparents disowned their mother for refusing to be mistreated? What will they think when they hear that their grandmother threatened to cut them off unless their mother canceled a charity gala that would help thousands of children? Don't twist this around, my father warned. We're trying to save this family. No, you're trying to save your version of this family. The version where Bethany gets to be cruel without consequences. Where I have to smile and take it. Where keeping the peace is more important than doing what's right. I walked to the window, looking out at the town that would soon host the biggest philanthropic event in its history. But here's what you don't understand. I'm not the same person I was a month ago. I'm not the daughter who apologizes for existing, who shrinks herself to make others comfortable, who values your approval more than her own dignity. I turned back to face them. I'm a woman who runs a foundation that's changed thousands of lives. I'm engaged to a man who sees my worth and celebrates it. I'm finally, for the first time in my life, proud of who I am and what I've accomplished. And if that's not enough for you, I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. If my happiness and success threaten you so much that you'd rather disown me than celebrate me, then maybe we were never really family at all. The silence in the room was deafening. My parents sat frozen, apparently stunned that their nuclear option had failed to detonate my resolve. Patricia, I said to my laptop. Please make a note that Mr. and Mrs. Robert Hartwell have declined their invitation to the gala. Remove them from the guest list and the family table. Understood, Miss Cassandra. My mother gasped. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You came here with an ultimatum, cancel the gala or lose your family. I'm calling your bluff. The gala proceeds as planned. My father stood up, his face a mask of cold fury. Then you've made your choice. Yes, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. I've chosen dignity over dysfunction. I've chosen growth over stagnation. I've chosen a future where I'm valued over a past where I was tolerated. They walked toward the door, my mother clutching her purse like a lifeline. My father's shoulders rigid with the kind of pride that would never allow him to admit he might be wrong. "Don't come crawling back," my mother said as they reached the threshold. "When this all falls apart, when your foreign boyfriend gets bored and moves on, when reality sets in, don't expect us to welcome you home." I watched them leave, listened to their car pull away, and then sank back into my chair. My hands were trembling, my heart was racing, but underneath the fear and sadness was something else entirely: relief. "Miss Cassandra," Patricia's voice was gentle through the speakers. "Are you all right?" "I think," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I'm better than all right. I think I'm finally free." From the laptop screen, Patricia smiled. "Then let's throw the best damn gala this town has ever seen." The legal documents arrived by courier exactly 48 hours later, on a Thursday afternoon that started like any other. I was in the Peninsula Hotel's ballroom, overseeing the final setup for Saturday's gala, crystal chandeliers being adjusted, floral arrangements that cost more than most people's monthly rent being positioned just so, a stage being constructed for the evening speakers. My phone buzzed with a text from the building's front desk. "Emergency delivery. Requires signature." Very official looking. I found the courier waiting in the hotel lobby, a thin man in a crisp uniform holding a thick manila envelope like it contained state secrets. The return address made my stomach drop: Petton, Hayes and Associates, the law firm that had handled my family's legal affairs for 3 decades. "Miss Cassandra Hartwell?" "That's me." He handed me the envelope and a digital tablet. "Please sign here." Full signature, not initials. The moment I signed, I felt something shift irrevocably. Whatever was in that envelope would change everything, and we all knew it. I waited until I was back in the ballroom staging area, surrounded by the organized chaos of event preparation, before opening it. The first document made everything clear with brutal efficiency: formal notice of disinheritance. The language was surgical, designed to cut cleanly and completely. Robert and Margaret Hartwell hereby revoke all previous wills, trusts, and estate planning documents that included provisions for their daughter, Cassandra Marie Hartwell. Effective immediately, I would inherit nothing: no money, no property, no family heirlooms, no stake in the family business that her great-grandfather had built. But it was the second document that took my breath away. Restraining order application. My parents had filed for a legal restraining order, claiming that my, quote, harassment and intimidation tactics constituted a threat to their safety and peace of mind. The application cited the Foundation Gala as evidence of stalking behavior and requested that I be legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of their home, their workplace, or any events they might attend. The third document was a cease and desist letter, demanding that I stop, quote, using the Hartwell name in association with any public-facing entity, including but not limited to, the Rutherford Foundation. My hands trembled, but not with fear. With a white-hot anger that burned away any lingering sadness. They weren't just cutting me off financially, they were trying to legally erase me. To deny my very identity. It was a vicious, petty, and deeply personal attack. Just then, Patricia walked into the staging area, her expression calm, but her eyes held a spark of fire when she saw the documents. "Ah, it arrived then. May I?" I handed them to her, and watched her expression change as she read each page. "My word," she murmured. "This is vindictive. Doesn't begin to cover it." "They're trying to legally erase me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Not just financially, but literally. They want me to stop existing as their daughter in any public way." Patricia's phone was already in her hand. "I'm calling our legal team immediately. This restraining order application is frivolous. You haven't harassed anyone. You've simply succeeded publicly. And the name usage demands are laughable, since Hartwell is your legal name, regardless of their feelings about it." As she stepped away to make calls, I looked around the ballroom that would soon host 750 of the most influential people on the East Coast tomorrow night. This room would be filled with senators and CEOs, philanthropists and celebrities, all here to celebrate work I'd done quietly for years. Camera crews from 3 major networks would document the evening. Vanity Fair would publish a 6-page spread about America's most surprising philanthropist. And my parents thought they could diminish that with legal papers. My phone rang, Damien's ringtone cutting through the noise of setup crews. My love, his familiar accent was warm with concern. Patricia just called me about some legal documents. Are you all right? I paused, taking inventory of my emotions. I'm angry. I'm sad. But mostly, I think I'm relieved. Relieved they've made it official. Now I'm not their daughter anymore, legally or emotionally, which means I don't have to pretend that their approval matters. I don't have to hold space for their dysfunction. I can just be free. And how does freedom feel? I looked around the ballroom again, watching workers transform an empty space into something magical, terrifying, and exhilarating at the same time. Good. That means you're growing. An hour later, Patricia returned with updates that ranged from encouraging to downright satisfying. Our attorneys have reviewed everything, she said, settling into the chair beside me. The restraining order application will be dismissed. It's clearly retaliatory and without merit. The cease and desist letter is unenforceable, since you are not deriving any legal obligations to their debts or business liabilities. What about the family business? That's where it gets interesting. Your great-grandfather's original incorporation documents include provisions that your parents apparently forgot about. You may have more legal standing than they realize, but our attorneys recommend addressing that after the gala, when you can make decisions without emotional pressure. As the afternoon wore on, word of the legal documents spread through our small team. Miranda arrived from New York with fire in her eyes and a strategy that made me slightly afraid for my parents' reputation. The hotel's event coordinator offered to have security, quote, accidentally lose any legal papers that might be delivered during the gala weekend. Even the florist, a tiny woman named Rosa who barely spoke English, patted my hand and muttered something in Spanish that sounded both sympathetic and vaguely threatening. But it was the response from unexpected quarters that really drove home how completely the narrative had shifted. Great Aunt Ruth called at 6 p.m., her voice crackling with indignation. Cassandra honey, I just heard about those damn fool papers your parents sent. I want you to know that not everyone in this family has lost their minds. Aunt Ruth, no, let me finish. I've been thinking about this whole mess, and I've made some decisions. First, I'm changing my own will. Everything I was leaving to your parents is now going to you and that foundation of yours. My jaw dropped. Second, I'm calling every person I know who was invited to your event to make sure they understand that your parents' behavior doesn't represent the rest of us. Some of us are proud of what you've accomplished. Third, she continued, her voice gaining strength, I am going to be your date to that gala. 86 years old, and I'm going to dance the night away celebrating my great niece who had the courage to build something beautiful instead of tearing other people down. By the time I hung up the phone, I was crying, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that family isn't just about blood. Sometimes it's about who chooses to stand with you when standing costs them something. The legal papers sat on the table beside me, formally severing ties that had been emotionally cut weeks ago. But instead of feeling diminished, I felt expanded. Instead of feeling rejected, I felt selected, chosen by people who valued what I brought to the world, rather than demanding I shrink to accommodate their insecurities. Tomorrow night, in this very ballroom, I would celebrate not just the foundation's work, but my own transformation, from someone who begged for acceptance to someone who commanded respect. And for the first time in my life, I couldn't wait to see who I was becoming. The Peninsula Hotel ballroom on Saturday night looked like something from a fairy tale, but one written by adults who understood the power of purpose mixed with glamour. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across walls draped in midnight blue silk, while centerpieces of white orchids and cascading diamonds created islands of elegance at each table. The stage, where I would soon deliver the most important speech of my life, was flanked by massive screens displaying images from foundation projects around the world, children in newly built schools, families receiving clean water systems, scholarship recipients graduating from universities. But it was the people filling those 750 seats that truly took my breath away. I stood in the staging area behind the ballroom, watching through a crack in the curtain as guests arrived. Senators and philanthropists mingled with local business owners and teachers. The governor of the state was deep in conversation with the manager of our town's only bookstore. Celebrities I'd seen on magazine covers were taking selfies with high school students who'd received foundation scholarships. You look absolutely radiant, Damien said, appearing beside me in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. Even after all these months, the sight of him still made my heart skip, 6 feet of South African confidence, wrapped in Italian wool, with eyes that saw straight through to my soul. I looked terrified, I corrected, smoothing the midnight blue gown that had been custom-made in Milan. The dress was a masterpiece, silk that moved like water, with hand-sewn crystals that caught the light like captured stars. But more importantly, it was armor for the woman I'd become. Terrified and radiant, he amended, pressing a gentle kiss to my temple. The combination suits you. Through the curtain, I spotted faces that told the story of how completely everything had changed. Marcus Webb was at table 12 with his construction company's biggest clients, all of them eager to discuss potential partnership opportunities with the foundation. Jennifer from Denver had flown in with her husband and teenage daughter, who'd been accepted to one of our scholarship programs. Even Mrs. Chen from the dry cleaners was there, wearing what was clearly her finest dress and beaming with pride as she introduced her family to other guests. But it was table 7 that made my chest tighten with emotion. Great Aunt Ruth sat like a queen in royal blue velvet, her silver hair styled in an elegant chignon, holding court with a mix of town officials and foundation board members who hung on her every word. She'd kept her promise to be my date, and the sight of her, so proud, so defiant of family pressure, nearly brought me to tears. 5 minutes, Miss Hartwell, the stage manager, appeared at my elbow. How are we feeling? Before I could answer, Patricia materialized with last-minute updates that would have sent the old me into a panic. The press section is completely full, she said briskly. Vanity Fair, Town and Country, 3 network news crews, and something called BuzzFeed that apparently has 40 million followers. The mayor wants to present you with a key to the city during your speech. And, she paused dramatically, we've had 3 more major corporations call in the last hour wanting to discuss partnership opportunities. Any word from, I couldn't finish the question. Your parents? They know. But there have been some other interesting developments on that front. She handed me her phone, open to a social media post that made my eyes widen. It was from Dr. Harrison, the pediatric surgeon who ran the children's hospital program we were funding. The post showed him in scrubs, surrounded by young patients, with a caption that read, "Tonight, the Rutherford Foundation is hosting a gala that will fund life-saving surgeries for children who couldn't otherwise afford them." While some people question family loyalty, I question how anyone could oppose saving children's lives. Hashtag proud to support Cassandra Hartwell, hashtag incredible work, hashtag real family. The post had been shared over 1,000 times, with comments that ranged from heartwarming support to pointed criticism of, quote, parents who put pride over their daughter's humanitarian work. The narrative has shifted completely, Patricia explained. Instead of family drama, the story has become about choosing service over selfishness, about building bridges instead of burning them. You're not being seen as the daughter who defied her parents. You're being seen as the philanthropist who refused to let family dysfunction stop her from helping others. The stage manager tapped my shoulder. 2 minutes. Damien took my hands, his familiar touch steadying me. Remember what you told me the night you first described this foundation? You said you wanted to prove that one person's generosity could ripple outward and change the world. Look around, my love. You've done that. I looked through the curtain one more time. The ballroom was full to capacity, with people still streaming in and finding standing room along the walls. But it was the energy in the room that struck me most. Not the polite attention of a charity dinner, but the genuine excitement of people who believed in something bigger than themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, the voice of the evening's master of ceremonies echoed through the ballroom. Please welcome the founder and president of the Rutherford Foundation, Miss Cassandra Hartwell. The applause hit me like a wave as I walked onto the stage, the sound building and building until it felt like the room itself was celebrating. Cameras flashed, but not in the intrusive way I'd feared, more like capturing a moment that people wanted to remember. I reached the podium and looked out at 750 faces, turned toward me with expressions ranging from curiosity to admiration to genuine love. These people weren't here because they had to be. Weren't here to judge or diminish or tear down. They were here to celebrate something beautiful that had grown from a place of pain. Good evening, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. 3 months ago, I was a woman who had learned to make herself smaller to avoid conflict. Tonight, I stand before you as someone who has learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and for the world, is to take up all the space you deserve. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic, but I held up my hand gently. This foundation exists because I learned something important. When people try to diminish your light, you don't dim it to make them comfortable. You shine brighter, and use that light to help find their way. As I began to tell the story of the foundation's work, of the schools built and children educated and communities transformed, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Not just confidence, not just pride, but a deep, settled knowledge of my own worth that no one could take away. From table 7, Great Aunt Ruth raised her champagne glass in a silent toast, her eyes shining with tears of joy. From the wings, Damien watched with the kind of love that had made all of this possible. Not love that demanded I be smaller, but love that celebrated every inch of who I was becoming. And from the audience, 750 people listened as I transformed pain into purpose, rejection into resilience, and family dysfunction into a chosen family of thousands who believed in building something beautiful together. This wasn't just a fundraising gala. This was a coronation. The crowning of a woman who had finally learned to value her own voice above the noise of people who had never deserved to hear it. 6 months after the gala, I was in my new office, a converted Victorian mansion that now served as the Rutherford Foundation's North American headquarters, when the call came that would close this chapter of my life forever. The foundation had grown exponentially since that Saturday night at the Peninsula. 3 more major corporations had signed partnership agreements. We'd opened offices in Chicago and Los Angeles. The scholarship program alone was now supporting over 5,000 students globally. But more importantly, we'd launched something I was particularly proud of, the Second Chance Initiative, providing resources and support for people breaking free from toxic family dynamics. Miss Cassandra, my assistant, knocked on my door. "There's a Bethany Morrison on line 3. She says it's urgent and personal." I stared at the phone for a long moment. It had been 6 months since the wedding, 4 months since my parents' legal documents, 3 months since Great Aunt Ruth had passed away peacefully in her sleep, leaving me her entire estate with a note that simply read, "For the granddaughter who chose love over fear." Bethany had tried to contest the will, of course. It had taken exactly 1 meeting with our legal team for her to understand that Ruth had been methodical in her documentation and unshakable in her reasoning. I picked up the receiver. "Cassie?" Bethy's voice was smaller than I remembered, uncertain in a way that was completely foreign to the sister I'd grown up with. "Hello, Bethany. I need to see you. To talk to you. In person." I looked out my office window at the garden where we held outdoor meetings when the weather was nice. It was December now, but the winter sun was streaming through bare branches, creating patterns of light and shadow on the frozen ground. "What about?" "About everything. About Mom and Dad. About what I did. About," her voice broke. "About how I destroyed our family because I couldn't stand seeing you happy." The admission hung in the air between us. After 32 years of deflection and excuses and blame shifting, Bethany had finally said the truth out loud. "Where would you like to meet? Could you come to my house? I know I don't deserve to ask, but Trevor's at work, and I need to say things that I can't say anywhere public." An hour later, I stood on the doorstep of the colonial house in Bethany and Trevor's subdivision, wearing a navy wool coat and carrying a purse that cost more than their monthly mortgage payment. Not to intimidate, but because I'd learned that dressing well was a form of self-respect. Bethany opened the door, looking like a different person than the radiant bride from 6 months ago. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing yoga pants and an old college sweatshirt, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and uncomfortable realizations. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly, leading me into a living room that was decorated exactly as I'd expected, safe choices, beige everything, no personality that might offend or challenge anyone. We sat across from each other on matching sofas, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. "I've been watching the coverage of your work," she said finally. The Time magazine article, the profile on 60 Minutes, the White House reception for philanthropic leaders. I've been watching my little sister become someone internationally recognized. While I stayed exactly the same person I was in high school. She twisted her wedding ring, a simple band that looked nothing like the elaborate engagement ring she demanded Trevor buy her. "I was jealous," she continued, the words coming out in a rush, like she was afraid she'd lose her nerve. "I was so jealous I couldn't see straight. You had this secret life, this incredible man who worshipped you, this meaningful work that was changing the world. And I had a wedding that was mostly about impressing people I don't even like." Bethany, no, let me finish. I need to say this. She took a shaky breath. I called your ring fake because I couldn't accept that you had something more beautiful than anything I'd ever owned. I tried to humiliate you because I couldn't handle that you built something extraordinary while I was busy being ordinary. And when you finally stood up to me, when you finally showed everyone who you really were, I was terrified because I realized I had no idea who I was without being the successful sister. Tears were streaming down her face now, the kind of crying that comes from a place of deep, genuine remorse. The worst part is that I dragged Mom and Dad into it. I convinced them that your success was somehow an attack on our family instead of celebrating that you'd done something amazing. I made them choose sides because I couldn't stand losing control of the narrative. She reached for a tissue box, her hands shaking slightly. They regret it now, you know. The legal papers. The disownment, all of it. They're too proud to admit it, but they regret it. Especially after Great Aunt Ruth died and left you everything. Especially after they saw you on national television being honored by the president. I sat quietly, processing not just her words, but the change in her entire demeanor. This wasn't the manipulative performance I'd learned to expect from her. This was someone who had been forced to look at herself honestly and hadn't liked what she'd found. What do you want from me, Bethany? I want to know if there's any way at all, that you could forgive me. Not forget, because I know that's impossible, but forgive me enough to maybe let me try to be the sister you deserved all along. I stood up and walked to their front window, looking out at the perfectly manicured subdivision where every house looked essentially the same. It was so different from my life now, the foundation work that took me to different countries, the apartment in Manhattan where Damien and I were planning our wedding, the constant travel and meetings and opportunities to impact lives on a global scale. I forgave you months ago, I said, turning back to face her. Not for you, but for me. Carrying anger was taking up space in my life that I needed for better things. Her face crumpled with relief. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were, I continued. I can't be the sister who absorbs your insecurities so you can feel better about yourself. I can't be the one who makes herself smaller so you can feel bigger. Those versions of us don't exist anymore. I know, she whispered. I wouldn't want you to be that person again. Watching you these past months, seeing what you've accomplished, understanding what I tried to destroy. I'm proud of you, Cassie. I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of who you've become. I sat back down, studying her face. There was something different there. A humility that hadn't existed before. A genuine recognition of what she'd lost when she'd chosen jealousy over joy. The foundation is starting a new program, I said carefully. Family reconciliation therapy for people trying to rebuild relationships after toxic patterns. If you're serious about changing, about learning how to be in relationship without competition or manipulation, that might be a place to start. She nodded eagerly. I'll do anything. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. I don't want to be the person who tried to tear you down anymore. I pulled out my phone and made a note to have Patricia send her the program information. This isn't going to be quick or easy, I warned. And it doesn't mean we'll ever be close the way some sisters are. Too much has happened, too much has changed. I understand. I just want the chance to try to show you that I can be better. As I left her house that afternoon, driving back to my foundation office in a car that had been a gift from Damien, I reflected on how completely my life had transformed. 6 months ago, I'd been begging for my family's acceptance. Now I was in a position to offer grace to the sister who had tried to destroy me. The old me would have rushed back into relationship, desperate to rebuild what we'd lost. But the woman I'd become understood that some bridges, once burned, need to be rebuilt slowly, carefully, with different materials entirely. 3 weeks later, I received a text message that made me smile. A photo of Bethany sitting in what was clearly a therapist's office, with the caption, Day 1 of learning how to be a better human. Thank you for not giving up on the possibility. That evening, as Damien and I planned our wedding, a simple ceremony on a beach in South Africa with only the people who had chosen to love us, I realized that sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies. Sometimes it's building such a beautiful life that even your enemies want to learn how to be part of it. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the people who once tried to dim your light will discover that there's more than enough sunshine for everyone. My ring, the one that started it all, caught the light from our apartment window as I typed a response to Bethy's text. One day at a time. Proud of you for starting. Because that's what real family does. Real family celebrates each other's growth. Even when it comes slowly, even when it comes late, even when it comes from the most unexpected places.